Hi guys, John from LookSmart Home Inspections right here in New Jersey. And I want to talk to you guys today about that smell. We've all smelled that odor in basements, that musty, dingy, sort of dank, damp odor in basements. We've all been there, right? So if you're looking at a house, or if I'm looking at a house on a home inspection, and I notice this moldy, kind of really mildewy type of odor, guys, that has to do with moisture, right? So the idea is that we need to keep moisture out of the basement. And we need to have the right basement flooring materials, and we have to have the right basement water control system and the right exterior water control systems to prevent, this issue from happening. So not I would say there's a good amount of homes, right, that you go into a basement and you smell that musty odor. And a lot of times, that is caused by moisture, but it also is an indication of mold, right? So mold could be behind the walls, could be if there's a basement carpeting, could be behind the basement ceiling finishes. We have to be really careful with this because a lot of times we're not going to be able to see this. What we are going to be able to smell it. And to me, it's a documented defect. Like, I want to definitely look further and try to figure out the source of the problem. So one thing we can do is use a hydrometer, and then we can determine what the moisture levels are in the basement in the air, right? So we want to keep our humidity levels, if at all possible, in the basement low. And I'm talking at least under 50%, hopefully 45% or under. And so this would help prevent, creating the conditions that are needed for mold growth. That would actually help. I mean, it's not going to solve. Look, listen, running a dehumidifier in your basement is not going to solve your basement water infiltration problem. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is humidity and that high, musty, damp air in the basement. So running a dehumidifier is super important. But we must make sure that we, number one, empty that dehumidifier, because 90% of the time I go in the basement, there's a dehumidifier, it's filled, and it's just stopped, right? So it's not helping if it's just stopped. If that water doesn't, if that condensate, that humidity that we draw out of the air is not going anywhere, right? It's just sitting there now. So, if at all possible, we want our dehumidifiers running that water into some place where it just gets discharged away and not reincorporated into the air. Again, so we want to have that maybe discharge into like a laundry sink or a standpipe, or maybe the line where the standpipe where the washer discharges into. And this may mean purchasing a dehumidifier that has a pump on it, right? Because you have to really, a lot of the times, you're going to have to pump up the water. You could also discharge these units into like a sump pump, but I don't really like that. Never made much sense to me because you're taking the moisture out of the air, you're putting it in a pit, and it's just evaporating again. That doesn't make any sense to me. Either empty the tray or put it in the plumbing system, put it in somewhere that's actually going to discharge away, so we don't have to worry about constantly emptying the crock or the bucket of the dehumidifier, and then we can certainly keep humidity levels low. We also want to figure out our outside water controls, right? Are our gutters clean? Are our downspouts discharging the water far enough away from the home? Do we have a positive grade around the exterior of the house? I mean, I harp on this. Every day of my life is spent talking about, grading and gutters and downspouts and all of this. And there's a good reason for it, because a lot of times it's wrong. A lot of times it's not done correctly. So we need to absolutely work on that. But also, you guys have to consider what is on the floor of your basement. And a lot of times I'll go into a basement, it'll be carpeting, right? Do we really want carpeting in our basement? And probably not, and especially if we don't have any water control system. So we don't have a perimeter drain, we don't have a sump pump, but yet we have carpeting on the basement, And then what happens? We get seepage, we get water infiltration, and then we get wet carpeting, we get wet pad, and then yes, we get these musty odors in the basement. So what I like to do, and I don't know if other home inspectors do this, but I like to pull a corner or two of the carpeting, especially along the exterior wall. Now, I'm not saying cause damage, and I'll be very careful, certainly. But this can tell you a lot. A lot of times, there's a good amount of times where I'll pull a corner of a carpeting up, I'll feel the pad, I'll look at the pad, and it'll be wet or moist. And then I'll put a moisture meter on to confirm. So this is really important because the only way to know what's under that carpeting is to actually take a look. And yes, I understand it's above the standards and we're not supposed to do it and blah, blah, blah. But if you can do it, I think you should do it. I think it gives your client some more information. It also gives me more information when I'm doing the home inspection. It's not all that difficult to do it. You grab a pliers, carefully pull that carpeting. You know, if it's fighting you, you don't do it. But if it's coming up easy and then you can retuck it into baseboard molding, why not do it? I mean, it gives you another layer of information, especially, on a home inspection. So be careful with basement carpeting. There's a lot of better materials now that are water resistant you can utilize in a basement that's not carpeting. And if you guys have a basement carpeting, you have to understand that you need to immediately dry that carpeting. If that carpeting remains wet for like 48 hours, you are done, basically. Mold is going to grow, mold is going to take hold, and then again, you're going to have these musty, moldy odors, in the basement. So clearly, real important aspect. And if you have a finished basement, it's really important to have a French drain and a sump pump. And I understand, conditions can get bad. I mean, if you have 3 days of straight rain, torrential rain, we have a hurricane, you want to make sure that you don't have a beautiful finished basement and without any means to pump that water out of the basement via sump pump or drain system. And by all means, if you have a sump pump, please back that sucker up with something, a battery backup, a water flow backup, which is like a basement watchdog, or buy a portable generator. Even if you have to just use an extension cord, just make sure that sump pump is going to work. Crucially important to keep that moisture levels low. So that was just a brief talk on this musty, moldy odors. And I want you guys to understand also that we have to watch out for seepage through the basement walls. Most foundation, they're porous, right? I know that a poured cement foundation is obviously less porous than, say, a block foundation wall. But no foundation is impermeable to water. So if you have water laying against the foundation of the house, and over the years, that water is likely to push through in the form of seepage, maybe peeling paint on the foundation walls, or efflorescence, things like that. So that also can be causing your musty odor in the basement. So keep your eyes open. A lot of times I'll go in these basements and we'll just be loaded with efflorescence. And then we'll have like this dry lock coating on the foundation walls, right? Dry lock. It's like the cure-all for everything. You see it in almost every house. Dry lock walls. This product actually can cause more harm than good, but you see it everywhere. It's just pervasive. But that's for another video. But a lot of times this drywall, this dry lock, you'll see mold-like substance on this drywall, right? Dry lock. And that's because the mold is actually using that as a food source, right? So you can still see mold on a bare foundation wall, but less so if it's bare. If it has dry lock on it or some other kind of paint or some other kind of sealer, that mold will actually use that material as a food source. So you open yourself up to another type of problem. So I don't want to make the video so long, but I just want you guys to understand that musty odor in the basement is something that is not to be ignored. That's to sort of open your mind and eyes up to other issues, because it's just not, every basement has that odor, because every basement does not have that odor. And a lot of times that odor will be mold, and there's certainly other things that we can do, such as testing down in the basement to see, but I don't want to get in the weeds with that. Really, my purpose is to say, don't ignore that musty odor in the basement. That's a moisture issue, and there's some underlying issues going on there that should be corrected so you don't have a lot of problems later. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys. It's John from LookSmart Home Inspections. Reach out if you have any questions, comments, or anything just you want me to talk to you about for a house you're thinking about buying. Have a great night. We'll talk to you soon.